and you move on to a senior consultant now who is established in their career. Let's say they've been at a couple different consultancies, but they found a good home at one and they're looking to push forward now. What advice are you going to give them?
A senior consultant delivers the work that a partner has won. Partners win the work. So at that point, I'd be saying you really need to start developing the skill sets required to sell. And just like cost or schedule is a skill set, and just like people management is definitely a skill set, sales is definitely a skill set. If you walk into sales thinking, oh, this is easy, I can wing it, it's the equivalent of walking into management saying, this is easy, I can wing it. And the same as walking into scheduling, so thinking, this is easy, I can wing it. No, you can't. So I'd be saying to them, find the best partner in the business, as in the person who sells the most, and follow them. Say, can I just take a week of my holiday and just follow you to different client meetings and learn about selling with you?
Welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah, and I'm a planning and scheduling manager for Intel.
And my name is Greg Lawton. I'm the CEO of an AI schedule management company called Nodes and Links.
Today, Greg's on the hot seat, and he has stumbled into a project controls consultancy banquet, and he's been asked to describe the career of 3 to 4 different consultants, each one at different stages of their career. As he works the room, he's going to provide these individuals advice on what is their next step. Greg, are you ready?
This is kind of in the deep end, but let's go for it.
Yeah, well, I think they have free food and drinks here. So after you get done being roasted, you can go grab some hypothetical refreshments. So who do you think these 3 or 4 individuals are? Let's start off with the first one, beginning in their career. Who's the person? Where are they? What are they working on? Give me the deets.
Well, why don't we say that this is probably a graduate scheme or a kind of first year or two consultant. Obviously, we work in project controls, so let's say they're a project controls consultant in the first year or two. They've probably graduated with some form of construction management, maths, engineering, physics kind of degree, or maybe even not. They might actually have worked up from the construction site. And they've entered, they'll be doing entry-level jobs such as a project controls associate, a scheduling associate, a cost associate, these kinds of roles. And my guess is that they're getting to grips with the core databases that the company uses, and their main jobs will be data input. So they'll be looking at, for example, if it's scheduling, they'll be doing updating of progress. If it's cost, they'll be doing updating of costs and reconciliation with the finance system. If they're doing project controls, they'd be looking at the data input to make sure that cost and schedule meet each other, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Let's say this individual is working with a client and they got some experience in, but now they're looking at what's next. What's my next step up?
So the earlier you are in your career, the more branches there are. The obvious one is to go from an associate to a more senior consultant. I think generally they're called senior consultants. Everyone in the consultancy world seems to have a title that's about a grade or two ahead of where they actually are. So like executives aren't really executives, as in an executive being on the board of a company. They're more just senior people. So there's that kind of movement up. Another movement is into a client or into a contractor. And that would be where you're for execution. I don't have any personal recommendation or preference for this. It's really down to the individual. You and I know that the thing that matters more than anything is just getting as much experience and learning as fast as possible. So whichever route's going to offer that. A consultant's a great way to do it because you'll work on many, many projects very quickly. there'll be an element where you don't get the depth of going through the entire project lifecycle unless you're deployed as a bum on a seat and you're going through that process. But even so, just getting the knowledge of what the project processes are is there. And I'd just say that's what you should be striving towards. It's just get as much experience as fast as possible, because there's no experience that will be bad experience at that point in their career.
The other one about a consultancy is, depending on the consultancy, if they have a home office that you get pulled into, you get to then talk to a large group of people who also work on a wide variety of projects. So there's that kind of cross learning. Okay, well, that person says, thank you very much, Greg. It was nice meeting you. I'm going to go hit the chicken finger buffet. It looks like those chicken sandwiches are running out. And you move on to a senior consultant now, who is established in their career. They have, let's say they've been at a couple different consultancies, but they found a good home at one, and they're looking to push forward now. What advice are you going to give them?
It'd be funny giving someone like that advice, because if they're very happy at the consultancy that they found, I'd probably say that the path in front of them is relatively clear. Look, a senior consultant is someone who has either or great people management skills, so they manage people deployed on consultancy jobs, or they have great subject matter expert skills, so that they can do the very high intense analysis. So it'd be the premium analysis, or they'd be checking junior people's work to make sure that it's of the right quality. Now, I said either or because you can have both, but generally the way that consultancies work is that you will have to learn management skills because it's just more scalable. Customers are more reluctant to pay 5 times a rate as opposed to hiring 5 times the people. It's just a perception thing. What I'd say in that regard is, the thing about consultancies is, the thing that differentiates a senior consultant from a partner is the ability to sell. A senior consultant delivers the work that a partner has won. Partners win the work. So at that point, I'd be saying you really need to start developing the skill sets required to sell. And just like cost or schedule is a skill set, and just like people management is definitely a skill set, sales is definitely a skill set. If you walk into sales thinking, oh, this is easy, I can wing it, it's the equivalent of walking into management saying, this is easy, I can wing it. And the same as walking into scheduling, so thinking, this is easy, I can wing it. No, you can't. So I'd be saying to them, find, the best partner in the business, as in the person who sells the most, and follow them. Say, can I just, take a week of my holiday and just follow you to different client meetings and learn about selling with you? Because that's the next step that they'd need to do.
Well, let's just say the person, you give them that advice, but they say, well, there's also one extra step between senior scheduler, senior, analyst and partner. There is director between that. And that is just a bigger step of operations where they do a little bit of selling, but they're also overseeing our region. And definitely that person's interested in becoming a partner, but they are also interested in that next step. So you say goodbye to your senior partner friend, and you bump into a director who is overseeing the operational side of a large region, North America, whatever it is. What do you tell that person?
Well, this is very much intent. I wouldn't actually go and tell that person anything unless they actually came up and specifically asked, because
they did. They did.
Okay.
They got awkward. They did one of those things where they stood too close to you, when you first meet someone and they don't have a good sense of personal bubbles. They got right into your face and were like, Greg, you need to tell me about. They did that.
Well, to that person, so that person, I assume, has mastered organizational management, and if it's a large consultant, there'll be elements of politics and juggling. Just to clarify with you, are we saying that this person's, is this a partner? Is this someone already doing selling, or is my answer going to be the same as the one before, which is learn selling?
Let's say they're doing a little bit of selling, but they're at a level where I think they have more options. Like maybe they're not a partner,
Okay,
but they have the knowledge set, and maybe they are kind of sitting between like, oh, Greg, what should I do? Should I sit around and wait for partner? Should I,
got it,
um, you know, should I go out on my own? What angle am I at?
got it. So it's interesting, that one, because once you become a partner at a lot of these consultancies, typically you have to buy in. So you have to pay them a bunch of money or give an element of commitment, and that's because it's a partnership, and you buy essentially a stake in the business, and you also buy the rights to elements of the profits of the business. If you're at a large consulting and you think, well, actually, I can go out on my own, and I've got a team that will follow me, and also I've got clients that will follow me, so long as your non-compete doesn't kill you and mean that you can't take those with, definitely going out on your own is an option. Now, that has obviously positives and negatives. The positive is that you're the master of your own destiny, and you can align your value propositions with what your clients are actually asking for, as opposed to what your company is forcing you to give them. The negative is that you're not going to get in inverted commas, paycheck from day one unless you've secured, and growing a consultancy is much harder than it appears on the surface, mainly because of cash liquidity. So let's say that a client wants a headcount to come in. Clients pay, net 30 days, that kind of thing. But you're having to pay people's wages from day one, which essentially means that cash goes out of your bank faster than it comes in. So you'd have to be sitting there with a decent level of cash, or some very understanding clients that would kind of front you a lot of the cash to be able to do that kind of thing. But
Very understanding employees.
or very understanding employees that would follow, or a couple of months of just hard graft where you're essentially doing two jobs and then you bring someone in once you've developed that buffer. The transition's difficult, but you and I know that there's hundreds, if not thousands, of project controls consultancies that are anything from 1 to 2 people bands all the way up to like 50 people, 20, 50 people bands, that kind of thing. So this is a very, very well trodden path through a lot of consultancies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, well, the person is looking for how do I make that decision? How do I decide? It is a bit of a personal decision, but what are some framework strategies that this person could use to then make that decision of do I stick and stay
Mm-hmm.
or do I jump ship and run?
Beautiful. So there's what I'd say here is people have interesting that people that deal with project controls and therefore that deal with risk don't have sometimes the most mature risk mindset when thinking about this, because you've got to think about what's the actual risk that you're taking on. If you plan it out correctly, you can do it so there's very little risk. Because you've got to think, let's say the whole thing fails. Okay. Well, could you get a job somewhere else? Yes, you absolutely could get a job somewhere else because you're a highly skilled person and you've actually shown initiative to go out and do things on your own, and you're coming at it with a customer relationship that you can bring in. Um, do you need to put a huge amount of cash on the line to be able to start this thing? No, you just need to be able to support yourself for a couple of months whilst you get yourself off the ground and get commissions. It's essentially like just having a job interview and getting a job. It's just that it's a consultancy job and you're paid consultant rates. Yes, you can de-risk a lot of this by just working harder. So the framework that I suggest here is I'd have a column, I'd have one framework which is positives and negatives, and that's very personal. And I'd have another framework which is risks, and then I'd have what do I think the risk is, and then I go, what is it actually? Like, let's actually think about this. And the way that what is it actually is you have to reverse. So rather than going, for example, the risk is that the business would fail, I'd flip it around and go, okay, let's assume the business 100% will fail. How would I then solve that problem? And you'll actually find out that most of the things you can solve pretty damn quickly. It's not like you're doing an asset intense business where you've sunk 3 million into machinery. It's essentially you're selling your time.
Oh man, that P6 license can be pretty pricey, you know, but not as expensive as a license to nodes and links. See what I did there?
I thought nodes and links are cheaper.
I said not as expensive.
Okay,
so it's cheaper.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to give you a shout out, but now you just made it.
Oh, thanks,
awkward.
dude. Thanks, dude.
All right, but the other one on that is, to me, you know, I thought about an interesting way you could go about doing this. Is speaking of that risk scenario. So let's say you're working at a consultancy and you're director level, and it's high, you know, a lot of work in there, and so you're worried about bandwidth. You know, if you want to de-risk it, there's so many senior schedulers or like senior project controls roles that I guarantee are absolute super easy for anyone at that level. You could find one in your area. They list it as a 40-hour job, but you could probably do it in like 15 or 20. This is not super ethical, by the way, potentially, but I'm just trying to give people options and frameworks here. Go take that job. It'll support your cash flow, and then you can launch your business while you do it. That way you don't have a middle ground where you're like hunting for clients, looking for money, you know, all that stuff. I think there's options there to help lower the risk profile of doing something like this.
This is actually one thing. Obviously, I went out and I started my own business, and a lot of my friends were like, oh, "That was very risky." Oh, like, you know, going out, you don't have your job, you're starting a business. It seems really risky. It was zero risk. There was zero. I had a guarantee of employment from my previous employer because they said, "You're great. If it doesn't work out, we'll have you back." I had investors who were willing to pay from day one, so I didn't actually jump ship until I had the investors that said. So it was a period of double working. Okay, if you think about it, it's like it's just de-risking. People say that entrepreneurs, have a much bigger risk appetite than what I'd call the average worker. I'd actually counter that. I'd actually say that entrepreneurs are incredibly risk averse. What they have is just a greater understanding of risk and the wherewithal to do something about it. And this is really a mindset. And all I'd say to this person is you need to get your head around that, read a couple of books on it, take a punt, do your frameworks. But ultimately, if the whole thing goes to pot, what's really the worst that will happen? Like, under no circumstances should you be out on the street or you be selling your house or anything like that. That's just an absolute no-no to me. But, 2 or 3 months where you're looking for a job, okay, well, that's totally doable.
Yeah, I would agree. So you move along now. You're working the crowd and you bump into a owner of a small consultancy. Mm-hmm. So they started it 5 or 10 years ago. They anywhere between 5 and 10 resources that work on them, depending on the contracts they land. Business is good, but they're looking at what are their options moving forward. What kind of conversation would you have with them?
So is this someone who essentially wants to retire or get out of the game or do something like that?
Yeah, let's say that.
Okay. So there's fundamentally 2 or 3 options that they can do here. Number one is that they promote internally or hire in essentially a partner. And they give a large percentage of the business to that person, and it's theirs to run. So it's essentially they hand over the business. What you would expect in that situation is that you, as the founder, you hold on to a bit of the equity, so you're entitled to elements of the yearly profit. But ultimately, to attract someone of that level of caliber who's a partner who could win, you're going to have to give a significant amount of the profit pot to that person because it's going to be the incentive mechanism for them to earn the big bucks. And you'd have to run the numbers. It depends on how profitable the consultancy is. If it's median to low, you'll probably, as the owner, be walking away with not much. If it's very high, you'd maybe be walking away with something. And it's just because of norms in the industry. So that's you hire in essentially your replacement. The second thing you can do is you can look to sell the business. Now, it's very difficult to sell consultancies because they have no asset value. So if you think about it with a bank giving you a mortgage, if you default on your mortgage, they come and take your house, and your house is an asset, so they can sell it. And they typically, the whole loan to value thing is so that they can sell it for all their money back. So, if they say, oh, it must be a 90% loan to value, they can discount the house by 10% and still get all of their money back, and it's safe. In a consultancy, the only assets are laptops and, pen drives and that kind of thing. So it's incredibly difficult.
My sweet logo computer holding bag can fetch a lot of cash.
Exactly.
I had that custom logo put on my computer bag.
Exactly. So for this reason, the typical multiple on a small consultancy is about 3 times.
Just find multiple for people when you start. What's the multiple?
It's 3 times EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, tax, amortization, and depreciation. For anyone else listening, it's 3 times profit, basically. So if you earn 100 grand profit in a year, that consultancy is probably worth about 300 grand. But there's really not that many buyers in the market because there's better stuff. 2 things. One, there's better stuff to do with their money. You can just stick it in bonds and get 5% and that kind of thing. And then the second thing is that it's not of a size that private equity would really want to get involved. Like private equity are wanting to move millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. These kind of consultancies are more difficult. But that said, there's a way through the trees, and it's called a management buyout, an MBO, and this is what a lot of big companies actually do. And essentially, what you do is you sell the company to your employees, and all of your employees take a share of the company. So let's say you've got 10 employees. The company is valued at you're doing 100,000 profit a year. The company is valued at 300,000, so it's 30,000 an employee. And you sell it like that, and then all of the employees would be. Then this whole thing would be a partnership, and then all of those employees would be would have the right to the future profit of the company. Now, that is absolutely doable, and that can be done, but not many people just have 30 grand sitting around to just dump in buying a company that that will have ups and downs. So one thing, there's 2 separate things here. One is how you do the sale, and the second is how you structure the cash. So how you do the sale could be to an external party, internal management buyout, that kind of thing. How you structure the cash, so you're probably barking up the wrong tree if you think that you're going to get all cash up front. It's one of these consultancies. The buyer, if it's an external buyer, they do not know about your customers and this business as well as you, so they're going to err on the 100% the side of caution. So if you say all cash up front, they'll probably just give you 1 times multiple. Like, they just won't be interested because they don't know. They don't know if your customer hates that you've left and wants to cancel the contract and this kind of thing. When you do an MBO, what you can essentially do is a pension. So what you can say is, okay, all 10 employees, you're going to buy this company for 30 grand each. I, as the seller, I'm going to lend you all 30 grand each. And you're going to pay me that back at, let's say, 3 grand a year for 10 years. So you can actually structure it whereby the business produces the profit and the profit pays off the original owner, and the employees who work there over time, as they vest their shares, essentially they work off the loan they took, and they're left holding the asset at the end of the day that produces cash flow for them. Now that heavily incentivizes them to create stability in the business. It also keeps them around. It aligns the incentives so you don't generally have lazy people, and it also heavily incentivizes them to grow it. Because if they can grow it, let's say they double the size of it, then they're paying that off twice as fast and they're pulling money very quickly. So if you believe that you can grow consultancies, that's actually a great thing to do. So it's incredibly, incredibly hard for small business consultants to retire, purely because there just isn't the market of buying those companies that there is in other markets. But there are ways that you can go about exiting, so to external buyers and to internal management. And there's how you value it, and there's cash structures that enable it to be suitable and acceptable for all parties. I'll just give you a final example on that last one. So let's say we're doing a management buyout between the 10 employees and it's 30 grand each. And the business is producing 100 grand a year profit, which is 10 grand a year per person. Let's say your payoff was 5 grand a year, so it'll take you 6 years to pay that off. You're still pocketing an extra 5 grand bonus. And at any point, if you stop paying, it's the equivalent of like a mortgage. The original owner comes back and takes hold of the business. So it's de-risked for the owner. It's also de-risked for the actual person, because you don't want to be sat there with 25 grand liability against your name, like that kind of thing. And it's a win-win whereby the owners step back and they're earning 50 grand a year for 6 years, that kind of thing. And then the employees are pocketing an extra 5 grand a year because of all the work they're putting in. And then after 6 years, it goes up to 10 grand a year, assuming no growth. So you can see how these structures can actually be quite attractive.
Yeah. Now, you and this individual are the last two people standing at this conference, and they're doing that thing where, they kind of turn or like, can I leave? Can I leave? Can I leave? Because you've had quite the conversation and they need to go. But what I would say about this is super interesting. And I think this is one thing we haven't had on the show or really dived into in depth. And so if you are an owner of a consultancy that we're talking about, we would love to have a chat with you. So feel free to reach out, find us on LinkedIn and DM us. This is something I would love to dive into in a further episode and get more backstory and understanding of this, because this is a major route for people who are in the construction, project control scheduling game. You can go work for big owners, or you can work for consultancies. If you work for consultancies long enough, you probably potentially want to think about starting your own shop. And if you do, what are your different angles there? And if you have a shop and you're looking to exit, how are you thinking about exiting? Does it match up with Greg's framework? Are there other strategies you're looking at? So if you're in that position, feel free, or someone in that position, feel free to reach out, because we'd love to chat with you. Now, Greg, you've crevassed the room. You have ate all of the appetizers. You have tried all the beverages. Any final thoughts, or after we've gone through this exercise, anything you think you've missed that you want to share with the crowd?
I think that an understanding of equity value in the project consultancy space is highly lacking. I haven't mentioned two methods, by the way, which is public listing and getting bought out by a big consultancy. But I didn't mention a public list because a 10-person company won't be able to afford it. And getting acquired is the same as just going to any other buyer that wants to buy by a larger consultancy. I think that if people are interested in this, because ultimately in all other business realms, how to create very, very high levels of wealth is disproportionately geared to equity ownership. And like I say, I think that knowledge of equity ownership in project world, especially consultancies, is a lot lacking. So if people are interested in this, I'm very happy to go into a lot more detail on it, but you guys can let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for us at Beyond Deadlines, thank you for tuning in. If you could do us one favor before you take off, hit that subscribe button, find that little bell, get that little ding button. Will you help us grow this community? Every single person who likes, subscribes, and shares helps us offer more value to you for free. And so with that, thank you. Have a great week.